is in many respects easier because we're good engineers. We're good at manipulating metals to do things for us, to become our robotic tools in our hands. But we know that we feel more comfortable with plants. And ultimately, we don't want to eat freeze-dried ice cream for every meal. It's boring. It gets old. You don't want to do it for years and years. So you combine the two in a hybrid solution. Anybody recognize this?
Yeah.
Biosphere 2. The world's largest closed ecosystem experiment. This was a hybrid experiment. It was not just plants. They also have a massive air conditioning system, a massive heating system. They have CO2 scrubbers in the basement, oxygen concentrators. There's a lot of mechanics to this. I just learned their electric bill is, well, it's big. This is still running. This was not, I want to be very clear, if you've ever heard this was a failed experiment, please erase that from your memory. This was not a failed experiment. I would say the publicity was a failure in terms of how they marketed it or how they presented the science to the world. But what was learned through this experiment was incredibly valuable. Even though they had to bring in oxygen towards the middle of the experiment, that doesn't mean it failed. That means we learned something. When you learn something, that's good science. And what happened is that there were microbes in the soil that were absorbing the oxygen. The concrete was still curing. They hadn't considered that it takes 10 years for concrete to cure. And they were literally moving in just a year after the concrete had been poured. We learned something. So now we know when we go to Mars, don't move into your habitat a year after the concrete's poured. Absolutely beautiful place. I've had the privilege of spending quite a bit of time there. I'll be doing further research there for this. I'll tell you about it a little more later in the talk. And still, just a mesmerizing place to visit. It's just wonderful. If you have a chance to visit, please do. It's exciting. Oh, that is fast. Okay, this is Chinese Lunar Palace 1. This is relatively recent. So Biosphere 2 was back in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. This was they just concluded their last run this year. And this is one of the longest running completely closed ecosystem experiments. They're claiming 98 to 99% closure, meaning that they didn't have to bring anything in and nothing left. There were 4 people inside of this. There were 3 different runs, 2 or 3 runs. The last one was almost a year. And they have habitation environment, of course, but they also have this intensive greenhouse environment, which everyone in the project is involved in managing. And that's something, I'm reading Jane Pointier's biography, one of the original 8 Biosphereans, and she said that most of their day, almost all of their day was spent just managing the food, just managing the gardens. It's a lot of work. Okay, so this is another diagram. We're going to go through this quickly. This is, I love this one. It's very simple. This is the diagram produced by the Chinese for this project, and there's 3 of them. This one is the water processing, similar to the one we saw earlier, a little simplified. You can see that there are both, there's some mechanical systems, right? Mechanical systems, but there's also plant systems. So we have a hybrid solution, both plants and mechanical systems. And then we have solid processing, again, a mechanical system that is working in connection with the biological systems. And this is really interesting. They harvest the plants, and by straw, I think this is a language, we think of straw as being a specific species of grass, correct? I'm not sure if it's a grass, but it's yeah, so I think by straw, they mean any crop that is cut down and dried. That's my guess. And so they're drying and grinding it and storing it. They take a certain percentage and put it into permanent storage. They take another percentage and roll it back into the mixed fermentation. What does that sound like? Composting. Yes, if you compost, you take some of your grass, not all of your grass, and you mix it in with the food, you mix it in with other things, and you compost it. So they figured out that 13.9% is exactly how much of this straw powder, this ground up dead plant mass, you want to mix back in with the system to produce the ideal fermentation. Oh, that seems to want to jump. Oh my gosh. Okay, there we go. So this is the combination of the 2. So now we see plant systems. We see, here's the best part, mealworms. Solid waste treatment, which is a mechanical system. So we see a combination of the 2. Here's something I read just recently in one of the articles that came out. The Chinese are much more willing to eat things like worms that we are not in our culture. And so one of their major protein deliveries was mealworms. And these aren't tiny little worms that you might want to fry in a saucepan. They're the size of your finger. They've described it as being the size of your finger, the thickness of your thumb. So it's not for everyone, depending upon your cultural background, what you're comfortable with. But you can imagine that a worm is a very, very high delivery vehicle for protein. And worms eat everything, especially mealworms. You can dump everything into a bucket, they'll eat it. You eat the worm, you get good protein out. It's really a very clever way of doing it, and very likely what's going to be part of our food diet. In fact, that reminds me, my associate Cameron here is working on a book, and he's been discussing what will the food pyramid look like on Mars. We think about food pyramid of dairy or meat, and he's asking a very relevant question, which is maybe we'll have mealworms at the top of the pyramid. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about see-mok. see-mok is the name of my research project at Arizona State University. It's an interactive model of an off-world community. And actually, there's a word missing that. It should be scalable interactive. The S is missing. Okay, so this is an agent. Oh my gosh, so sorry. I think I need to point that direction. Okay, it's an agent-based model. What is an agent-based model? So if you wanted to simulate or calculate how much oxygen, carbon dioxide, how many plants, how many of these mechanical systems that you need to support, let's say, 4 people on the space station, you can run the numbers. You can do the math. It's mostly arithmetic. You can do the math and say, well, we need this many liters of oxygen. We need to process this many liters of carbon dioxide per hour in order to keep everyone healthy. You can go through each one of those, and you come up with a finite model, meaning it's not dynamic, it's not changing, it's a fixed model. And that will be very accurate for that particular environment. But what happens if you then want to bring in an additional 4 people? You have to run the numbers again and boost all the numbers up to accommodate the 4 people. What happens if you want to now go to Mars or to the moon, and you want to scale that system to 4,000 people? You could run the numbers again, but as we all know, there are economies of scale. Right? So as you grow systems, there's a certain amount of efficiency that improves. We know that if you as an individual are out in your backyard farming or working in your garden, you will work a certain amount per day to produce the food for your family. But if you have a tractor that can plow 20 rows at once, in the same amount of time you can feed hundreds of people or thousands of people. So there are economies of scale. So when you go into those systems of scalability, it's difficult to use the same statistical models or the same finite mathematical models to produce those numbers. So we use an agent-based model. And an agent-based model was originally designed for the financial industry. And the concept is this. An agent is an individual entity. That entity is defined by what it needs, what it wants, and what it can give. So I'm a human. So I need oxygen, I need water, I need food, and I can give carbon dioxide and waste and humidity. So in the model, we've taken those numbers. And by the way, NASA has these phenomenal books. Really fun to read if you like minutia. Or if you ever played Dungeons & Dragons, you would also like the book. And these books have 50 years of data of these kinds of experiments, where they've hooked humans up to machines and measured exactly what I just described over and over and over again. Not just humans, but plants as well, which we'll get into in a little bit. So in this agent-based model, you, the user of the model, are able to go to the website. You can say, I want 4 humans, I want a small greenhouse, I want 16 plants. And you build the model. And we have all the data in there from this 50 years of research. And then you set the model in motion, and these agents start interacting. And they take and they give, and they take and they give, until something gives, until something breaks, or until the system grows. Oh my gosh. Okay, so in see-mok workflow, you define the workflow, you define the agents, which is what I just described. You say, well, what is this? What is a human agent? What is a cabbage agent? What is a carrot agent? What is a strawberry agent? And you load the agents in the model. You configure the model to run. You launch it, and you let it run. And right now, we can do about a 2-year simulation in about 10 minutes. So you let it fast forward for 2 years, and you get 10 minutes, you get all the data out. For every hour of those 2 years, you get a data point that says exactly how much free oxygen you had, how much carbon dioxide you have, how much water you have, and then you get to analyze it. So this is what the agent diagram, and I showed you the previous diagrams. This is a diagram that I designed about a year, started working on about a year ago. And this is the interaction between all the agents, starting with the work of Dr. Raymond Wheeler. And for those of you who are interested in this topic after the talk, please go Google Dr. Raymond Wheeler. He is the world's foremost expert on bioregenerative systems and has, at Kennedy Space Center, he's still active and still involved. He has produced about 40 years of data. The guy is amazing and really clear, easy to read material that all of us can appreciate. So you can see from this, from his basic diagram, I started thinking about, well, how do I want to define agents for this model? So we have human agents, and we're concerned about their health. We have ECLIS, which we just talked about, which is atmosphere, water, and such. We have agriculture. We have ISRU, which is in situ resource utilization, which means you're using the resources available to you in that environment if you're on Mars. You have soil that's rich in many different minerals. You have water. We have structures, we have fabrication, we have power. These are each individual agents that we have defined in the model. Every single one has some kind of structure, some kind of need that it takes, and something that it gives. And a few more. So this is what the human agent looks like. And I bear with, this is the last time you're going to see any numbers like this in the talk. So this is the amount of oxygen in respiration that a human requires per hour, 0.0492 kilograms per hour. Water per day, about 10 kilograms per day. Food, about 2 kilograms, 2.3, 2.4 kilograms per day. And you can see this is what goes out, so this is in and this is out. And it's all from the reference point of the agent. That's why it's a plus and a minus instead of the other way around. So, why do you have those vegetables? Okay, who's got cabbage? You got cabbage, excellent. Sweet potatoes? We got 2 sweet potatoes, one there, excellent. Onions, did you fall asleep? No. Okay. Who's got the bagels? That's our representation of wheat. Excellent. I was going to bring wheat, but like, what do you do with it after the talk? I can at least eat that. Okay. Strawberries. Did you eat one? You did. Excellent. Was it good? Did you share it with somebody next to you? You got a whole box of strawberries and you didn't share it? Afterwards you can share. Tomatoes. I forget what the excellent, tomatoes. Okay, which ones do you want to bring to space? Let's all join in here. What do you think would be, if you had to pick just one, which one would you bring and why? Okay, here's sweet potatoes. Why?
High productivity for the amount of energy input.
High productivity for the amount of energy input.
Dense nutrition, dense volume.
Okay.
You fill up.
Okay, turns out Biosphereans ate so many sweet potatoes, their skin turned orange. Oh. Good one. You guys are good. Okay, so that's, yeah, in fact, in the Biosphere 2, there was a ½ acre designated for growing. The rest of the other 3 acres was not for growing. It was for oxygen and carbon dioxide. It was for their atmospheric control and for just enjoyment. But they found that over the course of living in the Biosphere for those 2 years, they were nutrient rich. Their bodies were getting the nutrients they needed. They did very well in designing that system, but they were starving. They were hungry all the time. Every one of them lost about 20% of their biomass or the mass when they came in. They came out skinny. It turned out that there's only one locked room in the entire Biosphere 2 for those 2 years. You know what was in that room? Bananas. They had to lock the door to keep everyone from sneaking out at night and eating the bananas. Because it was such a good food. It was rich in sugars and there's protein in bananas, and I think there's a lot of potassium if I remember right. So it really matters what you bring. So again, they were nutrient healthy. Their blood was sampled every month. They were healthy, but they were hungry all the time. And especially coming from a culture and a world in which we have a lot of carbs in our diet. You can imagine the transition to a low carb, high nutrient diet. So what else would you bring? What do you think about wheat? What would wheat give you? Speaking of carbs, what would wheat give you?
Protein.
Protein? Okay. What else? Let's think not just about nutrients, let's also think about the atmosphere. What else can these plants do?
Wheat grows fast.
Wheat grows
Supply of
fast.
oxygen and straw for your fermentation process.
Excellent. Excellent. Did everyone hear that? Okay, so he says wheat grows fast, supplies oxygen, and what was the last part?
Straw for your fermentation.
And straw for the fermentation, right. So we know that in wheat, you eat just the seeds, right? We're not ungulates. We don't have 3 stomachs. We can't eat the rest of it. So the rest of it has to be composted. Okay, what about, I don't know, let's pick strawberries. Why would you bring a strawberry?
Vitamins.
Because it tastes good, maybe? Okay, maybe because it tastes good. Okay, so let's look at the numbers. So, okay, so this is all the vegetables. These are all the vegetables and fruits that we have programmed into our model. And I know you won't be able to read all this, but it'll give you an idea. So these are all the ones that Ray Wheeler at NASA has worked on for many, many years. Check this out. So there's a category. I'm so sorry, it's hard to read this. This is the amount of light it takes to produce this plant for the period of 12 hours per day. This is the amount that it grows in grams. They actually measured how fast these things are growing every hour of every day. Amazing. I don't have that kind of patience. So this is the this is the growth rate. This is the grams per hour. And the total amount, when the plant is ready to harvest, this is the total amount of mass of that particular price of the rice. It's 2,500 grams. The amount of edible is 770. So it tells you how much has to be composted. If you subtract edible from total, you get the non-edible compostable material, which isn't necessarily a waste because you need compost. It also tells you how much nitrogen, how many phosphates, potassium, how much potable water you get, and how much oxygen and carbon dioxide are both absorbed and given off. So, let's check this out. So cabbage, total 572 grams on average. Look at the edibles. You can eat the whole thing. There's almost nothing you can't eat on a cabbage. It's not so good at the oxygen production though. It doesn't absorb too much carbon dioxide. Strawberries, not bad. You can eat about a third of it. It's better than cabbage for oxygen production and better than cabbage for CO2. Wheat, that's amazing. Look at the oxygen production of wheat. Right? It's almost 8 times higher than cabbage. So yes, you're absolutely right. Wheat produces oxygen. It turns out that there are many, many different species of wheat. There's these micro wheats and mini wheats and all these, that sounds like a breakfast cereal. And there's all different kinds of wheat, and some of them have been particularly grown and evolved for this function of taking them into space, because we know that wheat can produce a massive amount of oxygen very, very quickly. It's a wonderful part of that hybrid system we've been discussing. Look at sweet potatoes. Wow, look at the numbers on sweet potatoes. 1.8, 1.8. CO2 is 2.5. Look at the wheat, 2.5. Identical to the wheat. But what would you rather eat, a sweet potato or a bunch of seeds? Sweet potato. So it took 4 months to make the first pizza in Biosphere 2. Who wants to wait 4 months for pizza? But a sweet potato you get to eat right out of the ground. You can just slice it up and start eating it. Green onions, not extraordinary, not bad. But again, we like them because they provide flavor for our foods. Tomatoes, and green onions are easy to grow. They grow everywhere. Okay, so this is now. I have to tell you, I was supposed to give a live demo tonight. And there are 2 reasons that live demo is not happening. 1 is because I didn't bring my Apple adapter, and 2, because we're not done. So I can really only count on number 2, which is we are really, really, really close. And my development staff apologizes to all of you that we don't have a live demo tonight. However, I will send an email to Mark, who will email all of you as soon as it's live on our website. And if any of you want to be beta testers, we are welcoming beta testers for the rest of November and the month of December before we go live in January. So I'm going to show you just 2 of the interfaces. This is the configuration interface. And again, this is the inhabitants where you choose the number of astronauts, you choose the size of the greenhouse, the size of the crew quarters, the size of the greenhouse, and then you choose which plants you want to have, and this is measured in square meters of plants, which is how all of NASA's done all their studies, is how many per square meter. So all those numbers we saw on the previous slide was per square meter of strawberry, per square meter of wheat. And then we choose power, number of solar panels, the number of batteries, and we have all the calculations built in based upon the actual amount of light received on the surface of Mars versus the surface of the Earth. So if you take a 100-watt solar panel from here to Mars, it will only produce about 50% of the power simply because you're further away from the sun. And this is the